when things happen and you don't expect them to. You know, when I was at Jive, we were based in Holland, and most of the time was spent with Mutt and Def Leppard, but we also had to work the Jive catalogue as well, one of which was Billy Ocean. And, you know, he had his hits the first time round, Red Light, Love Really Hurts. And then he kind of faded out, and we brought him back again with Caribbean Queen, and, you know, Going Gets Tough and Suddenly and stuff. But he's a lovely guy, and he's very sensible. You know, he didn't spend all his money, and he's got one of the biggest houses in Ascot. He's had it right since the beginning. And I was out there once with him to pick him up, and we were going to the airport together. But when I got there, he was cutting his hedge, and he had a woolly hat on. And when he wasn't touring, he didn't used to dye his hair. His hair was grey. And so he's up this ladder, and I've got the car waiting to take him to the airport. He's up this ladder cutting his hedge. And this very well-spoken lady walks past. She said, "That's a very good job you're doing." He said, "Thank you, thank you." She said, "How much do you charge?" but then the ironic thing is, spin forward about 3 years, and by this time I'm at EMI. And, you know, when you're used to send out tapes and negs so they can manufacture overseas. I was taken by this company called Expediters to, believe it or not, the Freight Agents Ball at the Dorchester, Freight Agent of the Year. And the cabaret was, I don't know, Bucks Fizz or the Tremolos or somebody. And I'm sat there, bored out my tits. Then the managing director's wife is telling me this story back from the other way, and she was the woman. And she said, "I was so embarrassed. It wasn't until I got home my husband said, 'That's Billy Ocean.'"
Because I met him once. He's very small, wasn't he? He was very, very Billy, small guy. Yeah, a very small Ocean. Yeah. There was
yeah, sort of like an inland sea. Yeah.
An inlet.
There was one time we were in Paris, and bearing in mind, we just put out Loverboy in America. And Clive Davis, bless him, had said, "You're stupid putting that track out because it won't be a hit." Because Clive's words, you can't dance to it. So we just done a TV in Paris. And there was me, Laurie Jay, who was Bill's manager, and we were in La Coupole, you know, which is on the Boulevard Montparnasse, one of my favorite restaurants, really nice. And there were no mobile phones in those days, and it was chart day in America. And so I go to the payphone, which is right against the kitchens, and I call up Arista in America to get the chart positions, and the fuck had gone in at number 2 in America. And I called Laurie. I went across to tell Laurie, and Laurie was like a dog with 2 tails. And Billy went all quiet, and he said, "I've got to go for a walk. I can't take it in. And I said to him, "Look, you can go for a walk, but will you be all right? Do you know where you are? Do you know which hotel we're at?" And I told him the name of the hotel. "Yeah, I've got it. I wrote it down for him." And he disappeared. And so Laurie and I went back to the hotel, and we wake up in the morning, and I knock on Laurie's door, and no Billy. He hasn't. So we go on to his room, go to the reception. He hasn't come back. So Laurie goes, "Leave him. He'll be fine. Let's go and have breakfast." So we go to the breakfast room. Billy turns up, looking like a drowned rat because it was raining, and he'd wandered round all night, forgot the name of the hotel. And on the way round, he thought, I'm top 3 in America. And he gave all the cash in his pocket to a homeless man on the side of the River Seine, and then forgot the name of the hotel. So he couldn't get a taxi, and it took him all night to find his way back to the hotel.
That's stardom for you, yeah?
Yeah. Didn't touch Billy at all.
If I can just, one story about Chris Griffin, very quickly. Chris, I don't know whether I've told you this. I think I have, but I'll make it very quick. You were my boss at Chrysalis. Yeah. And you were the head of promotion or regional promotion.
Head of region. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was charged with doing the South. And at the time I was living in South Ealing. with a chap called Andy Finney, who was on BBC at the time, and I tried it. And what I did, I think I've told you this. Every week we had to ring in our reports, and all that stuff, and come into the office down again. Well, I laid in bed for a week smoking dope, and I rang all 5 stations. I rang Ian Calvert at Plymouth. I rang Richard Newton at Victory. Keith Rogers at Orwell. I remember them very well. Neil French Blake at Thames Valley Radio.
With 2 small Fs.
Yeah.
With 2 small Fs.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And I just whistled the tune down the line. Ian Calvert gave me Record of the Week. I believe there was a Leo Sayer record. I know I whistled that one to someone in Belfast once. But I stayed in there and got 3 records of the week laying in bed. And I never told you because, of course, it's our job to go out there. But in those days, you'd buy someone a big meal and they give you a record of the week. It was dead easy. So I said, I'd ring them up and say, look, next time I'm down, I'll buy you 2 steaks and 2 bottles of wine. Do us a favour. So I remember you saying, well done, Steve. Great stuff. Just, what a lot of nonsense plugging really was.
Could have been a pandemic.
Yes, it could have been. Yeah. Well,
it's good rehearsal for what's going on right now. Wasn't Neil for French Blake like a spy for MI6 or something? He was like a real life James Bond, wasn't he? Didn't it come?
I think that was an idea he used to perpetuate. Hasn't he passed away now?
He has, yeah.
Yeah. I think that was an idea. He always used to try and prove that he was a lot more intelligent than you. He was always very condescending towards anybody who was doing promotion. He used to put you in your place. And if you were subservient, then maybe you get somewhere. But he was very aggressively arrogant.
He looked like a master, like a Bond villain. Most peculiar, put the willies up you. I mean, not literally, but I think we had our suspicions, Weird times. And of course, at that time at Thames Valley Radio, probably the best radio show I've ever heard in my life was Read 'em Right, which is Mike Reed and Steve Wright. They had the drive show. Do you remember, Chris?
Yeah, I do.
The plugging times were very, very strange, weren't they? But very, very odd thing when literally you could buy someone a meal and guarantee yourself a record of the week. Most peculiar.
I think, Steve, there were certain stations where they hardly saw any pluggers. And that's why if you bothered to go down to Plymouth, and buy them a meal, they were just appreciative that you'd bothered.
Yeah.
Sorry, I remember you and me, Steve, going to downtown radio at the same time. And I was working Criminal World by Metro. I think you were working the Floaters.
Probably ABC, yeah.
Yeah, and we were across at the same time, and they said they were so grateful that we turned up, because you remember the security around because it was in the height of the Troubles, and nobody ever used to go across because we were getting frightened of shot or blown up. And you and I went together. In fact, we went across on the same plane. And you used to dye your hair in those days, didn't you? So a dark red colour.
What do you mean those days?
Oh, you still do? Sorry about that. And but they gave us Record of the Week 1 week after the next, just purely and simply because we'd gone across. Yeah.
Well, actually, all that, on a somber note, all that finished because I don't know what year it was. I think it's about 79. This is not funny. So one plugger was picked up by a cab and he was shot because they mistook him for this banker bloke. And I don't know who the plugger was, but after that, we were never allowed back. The insurance was incredible to go to downtown. It was odd, but some of the greatest times I've ever had were over there, John. Just incredible. And I remember once at ABC, I went over there and I was met at the airport by one of the DJs, Hendy Henderson, and he had a bottle of Bushmills and a bottle of white, as they called it, lemonade. And I stayed there for 3 days in this hotel and got completely out of it with all the DJs. Went back to the anchor office 3 days later and they said, how did it go? And I couldn't remember much. And I realised I hadn't taken any records with me. And that was the occasion that I think I rang up Cherry McElwain who I was very friendly with, who was a playlist lady, and I whistled Haitian Divorce, I think it was, down the road. Meow, 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 meow. That's great. Record of the week. But very weird times. But Neville Farmer, you've not actually worked for record companies, have you?
A little bit. I did a bit of A&R for a Japanese record company called the Sam Corporation once, and I worked over in Shinjuku in Tokyo with them a bit. But I was based at Master Rock Studios on Kilburn High Road, and they'd bought the studios, and so we ran it from there and had all sorts of people passing through there. So you'd share the coffee pot with Mick Hucknall or Brian Ferry or whoever else happened to be in there at the time. And the Japanese were quite interesting to work for because they had no concept of copyright at all. So I wrote some songs with a Canadian guy called Doug Pashley. Gus Dudgeon produced the stuff down at Rockfield, and typically with Gus, it went far too far over budget, and they had to find another 120,000 quid somewhere. So the record company, it was Pony Canyon actually, was the record company. President of the record company went off to see Toshiba EMI and sold them all the publishing rights on the record for the 120,000 quid, including mine, which they had no right to do whatsoever. and in fact, he didn't own Douglas Pashley's either. And he was so angry when it was pointed out to him that he raised 120,000 quid through fraud that he had all the tapes burned and cancelled the entire because he lost so much face on it. And that was the last of that Douglas Pashley album. And Doug's now living in Finland, where he's incredibly successful.